So we're looking at a contact page, and instead of everything being in one column, we'd like to take the contact information and put it to the right of the contact form at larger view screen sizes, and then at mobile mode occupy a single row. So first we'll see how to do that using RWD Grid System, so you can control very precisely the widths at which posts will share and compress versus breaking to a new line. Now to take a closer look at the arrangement of the information posts and the contact form within parent columns within the editor, we're going to choose to magnify the border arrangement by clicking that button right here. And now the borders are a bit larger and they have a little bit of space between them and easier to see what's going on. Now looking at the arrangement of the contact information, we see that it's a text post, then it uses a social icon post, and in a social icon post where we can style and configure them for colors, size, shape, arrangement, and URL. And then below that is a third post where we continue with text. Now, if we look, we see that the three of them are wrapped in a column, and we want the three posts to act as a block in terms of their RWD response. So when we set up the RWD configuration, we can just do it in the column. Instead of the three separate posts, we'll do the corresponding setup directly in the contact post. Now, to initiate the RWD settings, we need to initiate RWD in the parent column, and that'll be the parent column of the contact form, which is the same parent column of the column which contains our text information post. Go up to our settings and width settings, and if we check in with the maximum width at this parent column, we see it's 705 px. And we check the box which says enable RWD grid positioning for child posts within this column. So first we can go to our column which contains the contact information post, and we go to the settings, column options, width and float options, and now we see that the grid choices are available now that its parent column is activated. The system automatically calculates the width at the various percentages that we're choosing, which under many circumstances provides pretty handy reference. We see that this particular page is set up with three different breakpoints, 790, 489, and 384. Basically, we want everything above the 489, which refers to viewer view screens over 489 pixels, to form two columns, and then at a breakpoint of 489 and below, we'll leave them at 100%. There is an option up in the page options where we set the breakpoints as to how many grid units to use, and by default, the system uses 100 grid units, which makes it easy to think about it. Each grid unit is going to be 1% of the available screen width. So the way RWD Grid System works is if there are 100 grid units in one row, then for each breakpoint we're configuring the total combined grid units of posts that we expect to be in a row at that given breakpoint should be no more than 100 and pretty close to it. And that's for combined margin and width grid units chosen. And only the CSS which is used actually gets created, so that limits the amount of grid CSS generated. And before we do anything, we'll go to the column float choices, and we see it's set at center row, which means to occupy the full row with no float space available. And we wanted the text information to position itself to the right on larger screens, so we're going to choose right float. Okay, and then we're going to go down to our breakpoints. Our largest breakpoint was 790. So for view screens over 790, instead of 100%, we wanted to occupy 34% of the view screen. And we're going to leave the left space and the right space, which determines margin spacing, at 0%. And at view screens smaller than 790, it'll go down to 489, which is the next breakpoint. We're also going to set it from 100%. We're going to put it down to 34%. And then for view screens at 489 down to 389, we're going to leave it at 100%, and we'll leave the 384 at 100%. So that's it. So effectively all we've done here is set it up so that the column with the contact information will take up 34% of the row when a viewer's view screen is over 489 pixels, and then any viewer screen smaller than 489, the column will occupy 100%. So we could have gotten away with one breakpoint at 489, but we keep it consistent because other posts may be using those other breakpoints. And this way, the grid system width tracker stays accurate at the various breakpoints used. And so we'll complement that with our settings for the contact form so that above the 489px view screens, the two will share the row space together. And then we can go to the contact form, go to the settings, width and float options, and then we'll go to share row space, and we're going to change that from center row to left float. And this way it'll position to the left. We're going to choose 64%. That complements the 34% chosen for the contact information column. Between the contact form and the column with information post, they'll occupy a total of 98%, leaving 2%, which will be space between the two because of the left and right float. So in this situation, there's no need to set any spacing left or right margins. We're going to go to 64% at 790, and then at the 489 we're going to leave it at 100% and 100% for the 384. And because it's at 100%, it will occupy the whole row when the viewer screen is under 489px. So we hit submit and we'll go to view page. Okay, there's our new column. We see the text now is off to the right. And then if we look in the inspector RWD viewer and put in question mark info in the URL, we get width information. And the screen becomes smaller. We see it responds at the breakpoint of 489 as we expected. By going from two columns to one column, with the column information post on top and the contact form on bottom. So the contact form itself looks a little bit compressed all the way down at 489. If we go back up a little bit, see at around 550 it looks good. So what we can do is tweak that 489 breakpoint and we can make it a little bigger. To tweak our breakpoint, we go up to configure this page, then to the RWD Grid Settings option, to the Tune RWD Breakpoint option. And for tuning, we see here the previous value was 489. We're going to set that to 550. There's a choice to substitute the breakpoints on this page, which is the default option. But if we wanted to make that substitution on all other pages, then we would check the side option. There's also an option to set RWD breakpoints where we can add or remove breakpoints. The system will adjust so that the new breakpoints will reflect the settings of the nearest breakpoint. If we are changing a breakpoint, we do want to use the Tune RWD breakpoint option. And then it'll keep all the current settings that we have, just change the breakpoint value. So we hit submit. See that the breakpoint has now changed from 489 to 550. When we refresh our page and we look at our RWD response, we see that the break occurs at 550 and the contact form and the information posts look good. There's no overcompression. So for mobile mode, we have the one column, and then for larger screen sizes above 550, we now have the post sharing effect. So that's a quick view of RWD Grid System. RWD Grid System is also very accurate for multiple columns, and you can control exactly how it responds at the different screen sizes, whether breaking off one row at a time or two or three, or making particular columns or posts disappear. So there's a lot you can do with it. And in the next video, we'll look at Flexbox using the same example.